Yeah, and we're back for round three of the Challenge 8 Expedition Peony. And we're looking at one of my fellow team members, ThufirHawat's Xena mid-range deck. So they lost in the top 8 last week. We're trying a few different things. So one of the coolest cards I see in this one is Fear. Can you walk me through the thought process that gets Fear in the deck and just overall what this deck's doing relative to the other like Xena decks that we've.
Okay, so presumably I am assuming, right, that here is typically here as just like an inscribed card that still has game late, as you mentioned. So for instance, in the since ThufirHawat isn't running, say, like the big wheel, they can afford to play these expensive inscribed cards that you could play as power early just to make sure you hit those power drops. But also, if you manage top deck it, it's still a fantastic card. And Fear as a 7/7, usually unblockable at the time you play it, especially in these sorts of Xenon decks. Very, very effective card. In terms of other things I'm seeing, so Thufir Hawa, I like that they have a very good plan for playing in the early game as well as late game. So, for instance, the Golden Horn security, which we've seen do so well in the Unleashed decks, but hasn't really been adopted by, say, the Zenith decks, I think is a fantastic call. And I think the way that Thufir's built the deck is to play to the longer game a little, realizing that, hey, uh, given the popularity of Xenon last week, it might be very popular again, and therefore I want to go over the top essentially of these types of things.
Yeah.
So we're hopping into the game. Okay? I think Dhofir Hawat has two copies of a very strong card gifted the bank in their hand, but might be a little bit too slow against, especially against the sort of aggression that can be mounted by the Mono Justice deck out of Canada.
Yeah, the one thing I want to touch upon. So I didn't even know that Fear was going to be in this deck until I looked at the deck list. But just looking at the metagame, I think the reason why you have Fear in the deck is actually to be able to low cost interact with Miner's Musket. So there's all these people war crying and like affecting the top of their deck, and then Fear is, as you mentioned, just a late game brawler if you need it in the say Argent Porter or Mirror match. But it's just okay. I don't actually have to take off from my turn to be able to deal with your Miner's Musket adjusted card.
Didn't even think of that. That is an amazing call. I would not expect anything less from someone.
Yeah, so I do like the mulligan that you mentioned earlier, and Thufir's hand having a 3-drop, especially in the form of the Rat King, pretty good. Cananada is just trying to figure out how to pace out this game. So you can play the Law Mage, and then if you student onto it, then you get to dodge call the hit, which is actually pretty decent. Where Thufir's removal just ends up being cards like Display of Will, Call the Hit, Hidden Garrote, and Null Blade. So you make it so that way only Null Blade and Vikram are bad for you.
I mean, exactly what you said.
It's like we're on the same team. Yeah, and so Law Mage is actually a pretty good call in terms of being able to interact with these Unleashed decks. So we see both members play.
Absolutely. I think like Law Mage is sort of a card that ebbs in and out of popularity depending on what the game is. But if you are able to play these relatively heavy Justice based decks, then I absolutely is worth the inclusion right now. Most likely over Argent Point Global in that slot.
Mhm.
Figure out what they want to do. Um, I think yeah, yeah, I like Canada's attacking here just because you won't be able to block on the crack anyway. You don't plan on blocking the crack anyway, and it is your prerogative essentially to be able to set the pace that Goofy has to respond to as the faster, slightly low to the. Oh, so
Yeah, The one interesting card is the spectral armor. So there's four of them, so I think Thufir is gonna have a high probability of trying to play around them. But if you could get cards like Helena and Fierce Magnaventress down, like cards with endurance that are lower cost in terms of attacking and being able to block, end up in two good spots. But I think we might just see either a chump block here or maybe the use of the spectral armor.
It's a it's a very your team card, isn't it? These like cheap invulnerable like protection effects, similar to what you guys did at Worlds with Indifference. I think it's an interesting call. It tussles really well in say combat, obviously, but since it doesn't provide like an actual Aegis effect, it doesn't stop the board wipes, such as the Saloon Massacres, the Nothing Remains that we should expect to see a lot more of as this metagame progresses. So I definitely understand where Cananada is coming from with the Spectral Armor call. I'm just not sure if it's necessarily the correct one.
Yeah, it just depends on the metagame you're expecting. Like if you're anticipating a bunch of Argent boards, probably not great, but you can still counter cards like Slay and even trade up in terms of power. I like the decision to play Sharp Tactician here because you actually play around the second Evelina, which Thufir happens to have in there. But by hitting the Evelina in play, having two battle skills makes it a 6/6, which allows it to block another Evelina, which would only be a 5/4 once it's blocked.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting. So you kind of got Thufir to pause a little in terms of their aggression and card advantage. So this is a pretty big turn for Canada in terms of where they want to take this game. So one line is you could play the Parliament Elder and leave up this Spectral Armor. If you make an attack like this, you might be able to try to connect with a kind of like an aggressive Spectral Armor. But if you play a Parliament Elder, connect next turn, then you get to play two more Parliament Elders, and then by threatening cards like Fierce Magnaventress on the ground, in terms of being able to stun, like you can really threaten Thufir's 16-point life total.
So even though they're only I think this Spectral Armor here.
Yeah.
If I might, in this case, I might actually follow up with the mystical instead of just so that ThufirHawat doesn't get yet another Reinhardt. Oh, not another, a Reinhardt off of this episode, which is what.
Yeah, it kind of depends on your point of view. Like, if you feel like ThufirHawat would have played a removal spell if they already had it, or if they would have played a Vikram if they already had it, there's an argument to be made to play the Parliament Elder, kind of goad in attack, and then if they play 5/5, then you can just Magnaventress or Shackles that and maybe be able to attack for lead. So kind of playing towards the long game, saying, hey, I'm at 31, like, it's not that big of a deal. I think I just beat you over time. Which does make a lot of sense.
This combat page putting in the work against ThufirHawat's deck. Yeah, ThufirHawat's deck, making this Dynamos a lot effective, putting away a lot of the punch of this Rat King, putting away a lot of punch of this Golden Horn Security, and wow, Cananada. I mean, mono even after the nerfs, right? We saw that Helena and Magnaventress were both specifically targeted during the last balance patch just to pull back on Justice's power level a smidge. But as Canada is demonstrating in spades here, Justice still has a bunch of good cards, and the cards will hit you very, very, very.
Yeah, the card I'm actually most excited for is Hojan. I just feel like it's yet another 5 that can be kind of overshadowed by all the other 5s in Xenon, or in the Destruction factions. But Hojan just like really allows a lot of your units to just become a huge threat. So what I like about Hojan is the turn that you play it, you can kind of just say, hey, actually, since you didn't have a Slay like a fast spell up, now I just have two really big threats that are in play right now. And are you gonna kill my Hojan that way I can't do this again next turn, or are you gonna kill the thing that's now giant, like a huge Magnaventress, for instance?
Yep. Magnaventress, Elder, Helena, just I think if these unleash decks become popular, right, then taking to the skies is very important. For instance, as we saw in Apple Chips v Secret Plans with the Rivas and the inclusion of Parliament Elders even in 3 faction leash decks and so forth. And um, the ability of Canada to pump out these massive flyers is going to be so in um, winning what would otherwise difficult board stall.
Yeah,
Also, I
like
love
Helena
Canada's
also
deck
helps with that.
list. I love Canada's deck list so much. I too appreciate bagels, and especially late at night, with when you just crave carbs. I understand. I thoroughly.
To so how do you feel about just like playing Mono Justice? Like, what do you think? What thought process do you think went into this for?
I think Mono Justice. The advantage of Mono Justice, two things, right? If you're planning on playing an aggressive deck, because of the way that because your expedition power right now is seats, tomes, and Zeltron Conclave, um, you will find yourself in positions where you don't have very good uh, early draws. Like you just have depleted power turn 1 and turn 2. You aren't able to get that aggression. So while I think there are some really good cards out of say like Rakano, like I think Riot Detail is continues to be quite underrated right now.
Mhm.
There is definitely a cost to even adding a second faction to your deck, let alone a third faction, especially if you're looking to play fairly aggressively, like what Canon is doing. The other aspect of it is also more Parliament Elders. I love Parliament Elder, and with a deck that's literally only playing Justice Sigil, it will be very, very difficult for you to at any.
Wow.
Unfortunately,
Just the overall pacing has been dictated by that law made because Dino Nest was producing a unit every turn. ThufirHawat wasn't able to play any of their 1 or 2 drops afterwards, and even after finding this call to hit and missing power, needing to just off the law mage just to be able to develop their board.
and this is probably a display of law. I want to say, just souping up this, souping up this Helena, trying to beat down at ThufirHawat while they're down essentially, and oof, yet another non-power card off the top. Or ThufirHawat, the dagger is digging.
Well, one thing I do like about this Helena chain is that I like that Helena's trade with you.
Yes. Oh. I also like that Helena's now get eaten by Magnet
Mm.
and other assorted three power. Sorry, it's not 3 powers. 3 strength. Okay. Can Thufir her muster? I don't believe so. Unfortunately, the best they can do is if they had triple shadow might be a little different, but as it stands, the one security can't do
Yeah,
anything about the flyers. And Canada pulls off the team kill against.
yeah,
Fortunately, unfortunately, you decide.
it's fine. I mean, whichever misplay member you like more. But yeah, it's pretty hard for Thufir there, missing so many power drops and being able to muster anything is pretty difficult because how are you gonna play, a unit? It's pretty difficult. Or whatever muster is. Is it a spell? I don't know. Yeah, so we'll see if we can get another round pulled up here. I think we're still in the thick of it. Let me battle 5 page. Oh, it's a spell and attachment. I remember now because I kept on trying to brew decks with like Sodi and Legion Blueprint. I remember that.
I remember when Sodi first came out and I played them in Expedition. I rarely was able to play her thanks to Expedition influence, but love them still the same.
All right, you don't even need to tell me who's on the other side. I know who that is without even looking at the deck list.
Yeah. Um, So
No, in all my time playing, I think that's the first time I've seen an Elemental Fury destroy a site.
really,
Yeah.
oh my
It,
so
it probably speaks more towards how much I'm actually in the queues, but
or
uh,
how often you play Elemental Fury.
oh, true. Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
sites are kind of just unfair, so you know, I try not to play with two good cards on level to play. But jokes aside, so the Elemental Fury just being like a very clean answer there, and Boomerang Guy kind of just figure out how to pace these turns. The one thing that they're trying to do is by not playing the Zhou, kind of forcibly due to the double shadow, but also trying to say, hey, you might have another display of survival. I'd rather have it not turned into, you know, a scaly Garuon. The Bergen being able to pull ahead here in a pretty meaningful way.
and now we're seeing the power. It's not really being the uh, glue, so to speak, for these controls.
So not even casting the last boundless knowledge, still putting a premium on the play.
Just double check that. Um, yep. Even I think that's absolutely correct. Just because uh, Boomerang Guy is running Inferno Phoenix deck, and you don't want to ever leave yourself open. That is a lot of charging damage uh, coming out of absolutely nowhere.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And as you mentioned, the Bergen, no stranger to playing control, really using like total as a resource there as well, and just kind of taking their, knowing that the Parliament Elder is going to stun itself, so being able to just take that hit and wait a little longer. So from Boomerang Guy's side, you kind of have to determine, is this Parliament Elder attacking next going to be enough? Do I have to commit the Gorilla here? Kind of a tough call, really. What would you do?
I think. Hmm, I think they mostly have some sort of fast speed spot removal. You've got the four displays and I believe four caloric mixes as well of the Burgun. So I think while they played in a way uh, to hold up the display and essentially concede the parliament that position, I think that you do need to put the Burgun on having some spot removal.
Hmm.
So in that situation, I do think I would uh, the gorillas just as it did. Unfortunately, that it didn't quite pan out that well. So, um, but wait, did they deploy the gorillas? I'm tired.
No. So the fall was played, which prevents the due to there being gorillas in the graveyard already, preventing the one in
Right, of
being
course.
played.
All from the Spire, very interesting card. Really, only a card that you can play in um control decks, I believe, just because it it does prevent you, does essentially like lock down yourself for a turn in the game, which can be extremely.
Yeah, so we see the site going off producing the sill, which is pretty good against the decks of the Bergen place, and we actually see the gorillas being able to pop the Aegis here. That's like some pretty decent game. But one thing you could do is, since you know the Aegis is going to be cracked along with the relic weapon, is you could display here, deal 5 damage to everything. That way you don't, or transform. I'm a little bit surprised to see the transform deal 5 to each you play this turn, but um, and then you're going to lose the relic weapon anyway.
Indeed.
With me, charge!
So we see the Bergen following up with another fall. So that's gonna prevent more gorillas from coming down. Um, Boomerang Guy is still really just wanting this extra shadow for the show in hand, which would probably just meet with the display, but still, from their point of view, it would be quite the threat.
Yep, and I think Boomerang is only running a total of 9 shadow sources in in their deck list with 4 seats, a sigil, and conclave.
And
So
Seek Power.
and seek power. Okay, more shadow sources. Forgot the seek power, but yeah, I think it is still a little tenuous to pull off
Oh, do they
double.
only play one Shadow Sigil? Is that?
Yeah, they only have the one shadow.
Oh wow, and that's their one shadow source. Oh, that's so killer. Yeah, it might have just been. So they're playing four Seek Power. So I imagine that's just that earlier in the game they played Seek Power for the sigil, and then the Seek Power can't. So, small concession made in deck construction, mostly because they're trying to support Ilan of the Ermstead, the promo that allows you to search for anything, and Show is your only double shadow card. So it does make a lot of sense, but we're kind of just seeing the cost paid for.
Yep, and Zhou is also just a single copy,
Right.
or simply like the mid. I want to say the mid range mirror. It's like, ooh, okay. So the top deck Phoenix here. Unfortunately, it's gonna get transformed. Players still fine, just getting. Or I think definitely go display.
Yeah, so by forcing the deal 5 mode of display, because the other line was you can like display to transform the Law Mage, then play to transform the Phoenix, but then you're still dealing with the board and you don't have board clear. But because of the way Boomerang Guy played this, now Boomerang Guy can draw Phoenix stepped cards from the top of their deck.
Very excellent sequencing.
One thing that's always frustrating though when you play against these control decks is you put these removal spells like these Slays and Shackles, and they're some of the best removal spells in the format. People like the Bergen just don't care. Just oh yeah, you have all those cards in your hand. They're doing nothing.
Actually, okay. So
Finally see the second
Slay
shadow.
and Shack, right? I think, for instance, we're having a debate of like which is necessarily better, and I think there's definitely an argument for at least in this form to say that there is an even if you are in Justice and Shadow, that you might actually want the Mystical Shack over the Slay. And that's because of this very powerful silence effect. You can deal with cards like Joe, for instance. You can deal with cards like Arcanum's True Heart, whether that's this card. And Through the Unknown has also been really popular following the rise of the following its buff. So being able to prevent your opponent from recurring strong hits is an equal consideration with Mystical Shack. And unlike a card such as Avigraft, the 3/2 Argent Soldier is a lot less impactful than the 3/2 Fire that you could obtain.
So one interesting thing that happened earlier was the decision to use Display of Survival to draw a card and gain an Aegis, which then found Stormhelt plating to be able to attack down the Zhou. Could have instead used the Display of Survival to turn the Zhou into 1/4 and not have to worry about on the way back. It leads to this interesting sequence where this Olin can actually set up a Zhou on top of the deck now, a giant Zhou, one that can survive the Stormhelt playing, and then since it's going to be Destinied, be able to draw a replacement card. But since since the Chloric mix was able to take care of everything in play, um, Stormhawk plating being able to attack twice, able to kill Boomerang Guy in that.
I actually don't think Olin could grab Joe just because Joe does have
Oh,
in that
flying.
position.
Yep, thank you.
But you'd because I believe uh Boomerang Guy still had a charge unit of the Phoenix Entomb, so you could just grab the charge unit, make it, and probably dodge both. Dodge, like say, the damage from Chloric mixes should should Berggren have them. Unfortunately, played in. I understand what Boomerang Guy was trying to do, saying, okay, if you have any board wipe in this position, I just lose. So I want to force you to have not one but two removal spells. Unfortunately, it didn't quite pan out for them, but it's definitely an understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. So I'm just gonna.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was that the game for the match, or are we just?
I have no idea. So presently on Battle 5, we are seeing 0-0 for the Burgund and
I see.
oh no,
I see the
0-2,
1-0.
0-2. Perfect. Hold on.
But yeah, it looks like
Yeah,
looks like our
so-
first match still needs a report.
Oh yep, recording that right now. TO powers.
Oh wow, really flexing on there.
Oh yeah. The multitask. Yes. So, the voice of God has told us that this is the end of the round. So, we'll be taking a quick break and coming back to you guys with round 4 shortly.